Your four favorites are Eraserhead, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, The Seventh Continent, and Southland Tales. Kiss Me Deadly is a black and white film with a feeling of paranoia like Eraserhead. Like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it's about a detective. Like The Seventh Continent, it often feels bleak and nihilistic, and there are numerous references to this movie in Southland Tales. Brazil is surreal like Eraserhead with elements of fantasy like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, plus it's set in an alternate history like Roger Rabbit. Like The Seventh Continent, it's existential and follows an ordinary person who feels trapped in a dehumanizing society. And like Southland Tales, it's a black comedy set in a dystopian future. There are aspects of Barton Fink that feel like they were inspired by Eraserhead, and like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it's about Hollywood. Like The Seventh Continent, it follows a character's ordinary life as it gradually becomes horrifying, and like Southland Tales, it's a black comedy. Little Shop of Horrors, like Eraserhead, follows an ordinary, insecure man who ends up responsible for and struggling to care for a living creature. It's got the cartoon logic of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Like The Seventh Continent, it depicts how unsatisfying the routine of ordinary life can be and how it can make a person feel trapped. And like Southland Tales, it embraces absurdity and blends genres. The Wolf House is a horror film with some nightmarish imagery like Eraserhead. It uses animation like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Like The Seventh Continent, it has a horrifying story that was based on actual events. And like Southland Tales, it's about propaganda. Speaking of films about propaganda, I also want to recommend Starship Troopers. Like Southland Tales, it's a sci-fi film set in the future that serves as a satirical critique of American society, and it may not involve animation like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but it has this exaggerated, heightened reality where the violence can sometimes feel like something out of a cartoon. Schizopolis is a surreal experimental film like Eraserhead. It's got some absurd cartoon-style humor like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Like The Seventh Continent, it explores the monotony of middle-class life and daily routines. And like Southland Tales, it satirizes American society while rejecting conventional storytelling structure. Sorry to Bother You is a sci-fi black comedy like Southland Tales that's full of social commentary and becomes increasingly absurd. Like The Seventh Continent, it examines the dehumanizing structure of everyday life, especially pertaining to work and capitalism. Like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it has this heightened sense of reality and some exaggerated characters. And like Eraserhead, it sometimes feels like a surreal, grotesque nightmare. White Noise is about domestic life like The Seventh Continent, but it's also a black comedy dystopian film like Southland Tales. It has an underlying feeling of anxiety like Eraserhead, and like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it has a playful, absurd tone. The protagonist in The Match Factory Girl feels isolated and alienated in a way that reminds me of Eraserhead. It examines how dehumanizing our daily routines can be and makes a statement about work and consumerism like The Seventh Continent, but it also has some dark humor like Southland Tales. Songs from the Second Floor explores a lot of the same themes as The Seventh Continent, especially pertaining to the bleakness of modern life. And like Southland Tales, it uses dark humor and absurdity as a form of social commentary. It also has hints of surrealism like Eraserhead. Seconds, like Eraserhead, is a black and white psychological horror film. Like The Seventh Continent, it's about someone who is unsatisfied with their ordinary life and daily routine. There's an element of mystery to it like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and it has some sci-fi conspiracy vibes like Southland Tales. Naked Lunch has the surreal paranoia of Eraserhead. Like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the human characters interact with characters who aren't technically human, except in this case, instead of cartoons, they're mostly giant insects. It's disorienting like Southland Tales, and like The Seventh Continent, the main character feels alienated. Eraserhead was cited as an inspiration for Pi, and it's similarly a black and white psychological nightmare. Like The Seventh Continent, it examines ordinary people's daily routines and gradually turns into something chaotic and destructive. And like Southland Tales, it's got paranoid conspiracy vibes. The Beast is a sci-fi film with multiple timelines like Southland Tales. Like The Seventh Continent, it has a lot to do with alienation and emotional repression, and like Eraserhead, it's also about fear. The Devil probably came to mind when I was watching The Seventh Continent because both films follow regular people who are struggling to find meaning in everyday life and are trying to escape their ordinary existence. Like Southland Tales, there's this concern about the future, and it has an alienated young man for a protagonist like Eraserhead. Another movie that came to mind when I was watching The Seventh Continent is The Sacrifice, which tackles a lot of the same themes. It also feels apocalyptic like Southland Tales. The Killing of a Sacred Deer also came to mind when I was watching The Seventh Continent because it has a similar cold, bleak, detached depiction of domestic life. It's a surreal psychological horror film about fatherhood like Eraserhead. It's got a sense of mystery like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and it has an off-kilter atmosphere and tone like Southland Tales. I feel like I need to add some more lighthearted movies since you've got Who Framed Roger Rabbit in your favorites, and I think you'd enjoy Hundreds of Beavers. It's black and white and has this isolated feeling like Eraserhead. It's got the fun cartoon logic of Who Framed Roger Rabbit with lots of physical comedy comedy and cartoonish characters. Like The Seventh Continent, it's about routine and how repetitive work can become. And like Southland Tales, it isn't concerned with being realistic, and it's an ambitious mix of genres that feels like a fever dream. The Lego Movie blends animation with live action like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and like The Seventh Continent, it explores how people get trapped in the routines and structures of everyday life. Pee-wee's Big Adventure also combines live action and animation and is self-reflexive like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And since your favorites feel like such an eclectic mix of tones and genres, I think you might also enjoy Save the Green Planet, Winter Kills, The Happiness of the Katakuri's, and Love Exposure.